Brian, welcome to Phenomena Radio. I have always felt that yours is one of the most important from a military voice about an area on this planet that is so mysterious. And every month and year now, it seems that we're getting more whistleblower kind of rumors, and in some cases, talking to us straightforwardly off the record, that there is some kind of an alien base in Antarctica, and that you yourself, as you wrote in that first email to me back in January of 2015, that you had 300 times you had flown with a C-130 crew over and around the South Pole. So I wondered if you could start tonight and try to explain to the general audience, what is it like to be in a C-130 crew that is your base of operations is that entire mysterious continent of Antarctica?
Well, thank you, Linda. It's a pleasure and an honor to work with you again. I really enjoy when we have our conversations, and you are one of the few people that really understand, my story that I told to you a couple of years ago in that email I sent you. Antarctica is a pretty desolate place. The crews usually are working 12-hour days, and the majority of that is actually flying. During the summer season down there, which is from September to the end of February, it's daylight 24 hours a day. So you can't tell, when it's time to go to bed. So the rooms that we stay in have the curtains, blackout curtains over them, so that when you're on crew rest and you've gotten back from a flight and you're getting ready to go 12 hours later out on a mission, you've got to be able to have some semblance of being able to go to sleep. So it in that respect, physically, it's very demanding on a person, because your body rhythm is completely gone. So you're doing this for 6 months. The crew on deployment, the crew is usually a group of people. We fly with each other all the time. Other than that, during the summer season when we're back, or the winter season when we're back in California training for the next season, we're always flying with different people, different pilots, different enlisted and navigators, engineers, load masters. So, but during deployment, everybody flies together all the time. So we get to know each other really well, and we trust each other with our lives, because we have to down in that desolate continent. A normal mission would be getting up somewhere between 3 a.m. and 9 a.m, going down to the ice runway or the skiway, depending on what part of the year it was, and starting a pre-flight on the aircraft.
And there was another very important discussion that I remember, that the pilots asked you, or asked the crew, why would there be a no-fly zone at an quote unquote air sampling station at South Pole, when the only planes that would be coming in would be like yours, would be up at somewhere between 25,000 and 35,000 feet, and that somebody made the comment, we're not going to affect any air sampling, so why do they have this as a no-fly zone?
Right, exactly. That's what we were told. That's what we were briefed. That's the reason why we were not allowed to transit into that area. Now, like I said earlier, is like there was nothing in that direction that we would have to go to as far as science, okay? All the science during that time was all on the western side of Antarctica. So, you're flying toward 90 degrees south. So basically you're flying south and then you're flying north again. So there wouldn't have been anything out there for anybody to even go out to. So that kind of made it odd that we were told that we could not go over that area, other than the fact that maybe, now I don't know for sure, is that the exhaust from the turboprops would filter down onto that area if it was overflown and affect their sampling readings for whatever science was going on there. One thing I do want to mention is that when we were flying by there, you could see like lines in the ice or in the snow, like somebody had driven out, like vehicle tracks. Mm-hmm. Okay, so like possibly like snowmobiles or one of the tractored vehicles, the ice cats they called them, were making a route back and forth from the actual South Pole station out to that opening. And we could see that from our altitude. You could see it, and it's very distinct. Anything in the ice that makes a line, you immediately recognize it and can see it.
Right. And it was still supposed to be a no-fly zone that did not make sense to your pilot, and that it was at least on an estimate, maybe 300 feet in diameter, the size of a football field, in a hole that was clear, and obviously people had been going out to it. Now, can you describe the kind of, we'll call them rumor talk, that you guys were exposed to after in your, like, sitting down with people and talking, and the guy who showed up and told you all to keep your mouth shut?
Yeah. I was going to talk about that. I want to kind of finish what our mission was to Davis, and then the trip back to South Pole to refuel, what we ended up having to do and what we were ordered to do when we came back. Okay. So if I can continue with that, we ended up getting to Davis about 4 hours later, landed. We're sitting on the ground with the engine still turning. They brought out the person that was injured. We loaded him on the aircraft. We got turned around, set power, took off, and was on our way back to South Pole when we started to get near that same opening that we'd crossed by when we were going to Davis. So we got within a certain, I don't know, so many miles. I think it was within like 25 miles or something. And the reason I remember that is because our navigator said, okay, we're coming up on that opening we saw again, because the navigator tracks where we're going in distance and position all the time, because we have to make position reports to McMurdo so that they know where we're at in case something happens and we have to land on the continent. So we were going there, and we got a radio call from the personnel at South Pole, because we were reporting in we were so many miles out, and that our estimated at South Pole was going to be at this time. But what they said was, okay, X-ray Delta 04, let's call it. X-ray Delta 04, please do not continue your course directly to South Pole. We want you to divert, make a left turn, let's just say 30 degrees, and we'll give you the heads up when we want you to turn back on course. So that's what we did. So when we turned, we were so far away from that opening that actually we couldn't see it from where we were at. At that time, we were at like 35,000 feet on our way back to Pole. And so we got the call then from South Pole, the controller there, saying, okay, go ahead and turn back on course. So we turned back on course, headed back into South Pole, and landed. When we refueled in South Pole, we didn't take on a full bag of fuel, but we put on enough to get us back to McMurdo, because the patient was in critical condition and we didn't want to waste any time. So we put enough gas on there just to get back to South Pole. So we took off and made the 3 hour and 10-minute flight back pretty much really fast. And normally we cruise about 25,000 feet from Pole to McMurdo, because by the time you get up to 35,000 feet, you're on your way back down anyways for landing. So we were hauling pretty good. And we got back in under 3 hours. We shaved off about 20 minutes just by, not flying the normal airspeed that we would normally fly. We landed in McMurdo, taxied onto the ramp. They had an ambulance waiting for us for the patient. We shut down engines. They offloaded him onto another aircraft. Another crew had been waiting to take him back to Christchurch, New Zealand. So they offloaded him. Then we put the airplane to bed. My job as the engineer was to post-flight the aircraft and make sure that it was okay to fly, or if anything was wrong with it, I had to write up the discrepancies and give it to our managed control people so that they could fix the aircraft for the next mission, for the next crew. So we went back up. Everybody got in the van and drove back up to McMurdo and got out, and we had to go back into operations, or the Puzzle Palace, as we called it. And we were told that the crew had to wait here instead of doing the normal debrief with our operations guy and then going back to get something to eat and do whatever, and then start it going into crew rest for our next mission. So we were told to wait in the conference room. So we all went in the conference room, and we sat down, and about 5-10 minutes later, this gentleman walked in that nobody knew, wasn't part of the squadron, but he was dressed in the regular green fatigues that everybody wore down there when they weren't on flight status. And he came in, had his park on, his stocking cap on, and came in, sat down, and took his jacket off and everything, and was kind of looking at all of us. And he says, "Okay, so you guys went through the no-fly zone north of Pole and violated that airspace restriction." And our aircraft commander says, "Yeah, we did. We thought it was prudent that we not waste any time and shave some time off our flight time to get to the medevac that was at Davis. We were told it was important and not to waste any time. So we made the decision to fly over that air sampling station." Again, like we were talking earlier, is that there was no reason why we would have to not fly over that, because we were going to be so high up that our exhaust off the engines wouldn't have mattered. The gentleman basically kind of looked around at all of us sitting at the table and looked at each one of us, and he said, "Okay, gentlemen, what you saw, you did not see. You were not over that area, and you will not ever talk about this again." Okay, and that's all he said. There was no repercussions or any threat like, "Okay, and if you do talk about it, this or this is going to happen." Okay, and we all sat there kind of dumbfounded. It's like, okay, all right. So what did we see? So none of us thought anything of it other than this big hole in the ground. Okay,
in the ice.
In the ice, exactly. So it was like, so why is this guy making a big deal about it now and saying that we can't talk about it and we didn't see it? So we all started talking after this guy had left the room. He then got up and walked out, and we all kind of looked at each other and we were going, okay, so what's the importance of this thing? Okay. Now, we didn't think anything of what it might be at that time, but later on, months later, during missions to South Pole, our crew stopped, and we had to actually spend some time there because we had some dignitaries, VIPs, that wanted to do a tour of the South Pole facility. So we were told, okay, just shut down your engines and leave somebody on the airplane to watch it and fuel up again for your return trip to McMurdo. And everybody then went into the dome at South Pole. Back then, there was a big, huge geodesic dome that had buildings inside of it that the team and the scientists that stayed at South Pole lived in. So we all went inside, and they had these basically like large mill vans, or those sea vans that you see on the container ships, like big containers, and they had made those into buildings. So there was 2-story ones all over, and one on top of one of the 2-story ones was a bar or a club. And so we went up there, and we were sitting around talking, and we were drinking sodas and trying to get warm. And there were some civilians in there, I assume were scientists, and one of my loadmasters happened to overhear him saying something about the operation or what was going on out at the air sampling station. Nothing was said at that time, though, about what was going on. It was just like general banter of yeah, we're going to go out to the sampling station again, and we're going to do some more talking out there. I guess what I'm talking, I think, was the term that was used, and that was it. So I was like, kind of funny is like talking. What does that mean? Okay, so then later, okay, we're talking to other crews, and they had heard similar things when they were at South Pole, but they heard that there was visitors that they were going out to uh, interact with. And I said, visitors? What did you mean by visitors? I'm talking to the other flight crew. What do you mean by visitors? And he said, well, my impression was that they weren't human. I said, human? You know, I said, what are you talking about? He says, it seemed to me they were talking about like an extraterrestrial or an alien, because they didn't refer to them as a person. It was a visitor. Otherwise, if it had been somebody like a scientist or a civilian out there doing work or construction or whatever, they would have said, hey, you know, we're going to go out and talk to Dr. So-and-so or Professor So-and-so, but not a visitor. So later on, when we were back in McMurdo on a future trip back, there was another crew that was talking about that. So it was kind of like we were kind of getting together and comparing notes about what was going on at South Pole, because nobody knew. So that's where the rumors came about, and the talk about there being some type of extraterrestrial and human cooperation with something going on at that large hole in the ice.